Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for coming and joining this internal workshop on communications that we have called Strengthening Our Voice. And why is that? Can you go to the next? All right. Well, it's fine. So this internal workshop, we are envisioning like 1 hour and 15 minutes in case any of you have urgent updates or something that want to share with the team. And our idea is to start the presentation explaining why we have this specific workshop about voice, because this is part of a process that we started with the visual identity. And in our communications strategy for this year, one of the things that we are contemplating is to improve how we communicate from different perspectives and using strategic communications. And this is the first one. So we will have more different workshops. So after this presentation, we will have a diagnosis about what we see in our voice, no, from what the communications area has detected, let's see. Then we will go to a shifting approach. We will have a practical exercise in breakout rooms and yeah, a presentation together of what is next. And then 15 minutes for updates if we have time. So with that brief introduction, Angelica, if you want to start us off.
Yes. So yeah, Esther already started with some of the context. I know that Felipe is new also in the network, but we have been working in shifting the way that we communicate and present the network to other publics since maybe, yeah, a couple of years ago. It's been a transition, a process that we have shifted our visual identity, and also now is this invitation for refining our way of like putting up some messages. We know that we have already added strong political voice. This is one of our strong points as a network, as an actor. But the challenge is how to sharpen our clarity, expand our visibility, and compel recognition and response for like, yeah, to have more impact in different channels and audiences. So we want to start as a reminder. We yeah, so we have transformed the way that we look, and we I think that we know. I mean, personally, I'm really proud of how we look. No, like, if we look our materials, if we find our way of, but we need to refine the way that we sound. So, and why this matter now? Because we have, as you know, an overproduction of information, misinformation, fake news. Like we are in a moment that is really difficult to trap attention. That we have in the economy of attention. We all know that, and it's a challenge for human rights organizations to understand how to um, make visible our voice and also rise against anti-rights narratives. Like we have different enemies here, no misinformation, but also the growing of the anti-rights narratives that we also are like trying to push back and also to implement spaces, to create spaces to for our narratives to be to lead in this information environment. And we all know that technologies move faster, and we have, I mean, to have the capacity to be in all the spaces, we will need, like a comms team of like ten people, like working in different strategies, working in different channels with different social media networks. But we can't, like, we know that we have scarce resources. So how can we like do the best? And I think that our plan is also like to expand our communications team to make all of you part of that communication approach. And I feel like we work like with all of you, we work really close, and it's just like a matter of just adjusting the way that our process is like works. The other thing is like because we know that we have a strong message and I mean, we know that we're right with all the things that we pursue and fight. That is not necessary. It's just, yeah, it's not enough to know that we are right with our ideas. We need more clarity, even better to say what we want to say, like to create different strategies and ways of communicating our message because yeah, being right is not enough. We need to be creative. We need to activate. Um, Not just that different strategies that we have it all. No, we have advocacy, we have strategy litigation. We're really strong on that. We have a membership that we're trying to make it more and more active, but we also need to be like great communicators, and that happens if we work together. So as a framework, you know that today we're gonna focus more in our written content. Like we know that that's the basic, the baseline for all the things that we produce. Like we all write, like from our writing, we produce most of the content that we disseminate in our networks. So this is like a glimpse of what we do, no? What kind of contents we produce, so statements, submissions, letters, solidarity actions, amicus briefs, reports, press releases, op-eds, blog posts, newsletters, social media posts, explainers, reels. All of this needs text. Needs yeah need a lot of text and image, and we are working on being more strong. Like, I mean, the visual part we can help with that. The text part we need to do it together. Este.
Thank you, Angie. So with that introduction, we are going to jump into the diagnosis. And this is more like as the communications team, we have to work across teams. So these are the reflections that we have shared, Angelica and I, discussing a lot, trying to figure out how we can cluster what are the challenges, but also the things that we do well. And then I'm going to present some ideas that we have gathered, and then I will invite you also to reflect with us. No, so this is what we have observed as communicators. Both Angelica and I, we are journalists. We have been working in communications for many years, different parts. So these are our observations, no, based on our experience. So we feel that when we are saying about finding our voice, the network already has a strong political, internationalist, and collective voice. So the challenge is that we don't have an identity. It's how we translate the identity into clear and effective communications, no? So things that we find that we do well. We have a clear political positioning. That's completely, for sure, we have political strength. We have a strong we make a strong connections across structural issues, and we are getting better and better, no? So we connect the dots. That's one of our values. In certain cases, if the context no is appropriate, we integrate also the member voices, no, sometimes depending on the material we are writing. And also we are improving the processes. And for instance, we have this template for articles that some of you have used, that I think it's useful, that it's an outline for coordinators to use when they are writing an article. So there are like certain things that it's important to take into consideration. So including a context, including like key questions that we have to think about before starting an article. No, so we are trying to improve our processes. This is a work in progress. So that for us is also a symptom that we are improving and we are doing something. No, we are doing well. No, in that regard. Key tensions that we have detected. No, so our political strength versus clarity, no? Sometimes we want to tackle so many things at the same time and check so many marks that sometimes it's unclear what is the main message that we want to translate, no? Or who we want to talk to. We have a deep analysis that is good, but sometimes it's really hard to read, no? It's very complex, long sentences, so it's hard to read. And also this having a collective voice versus lack of consistency, because if we have, sometimes you can tell that, I mean, we don't have like this collective unique voice, no? Sometimes we have like different tones, different ways of writing. So how we can, without losing the flexibility and our understanding that we are a member-led, try to improve how we build this collective voice, no? So you see, okay, that's ESGRnet voice. Okay. So so again, wrapping up, no, we could say that we have a lot of to say, no? The challenge is choosing what to say first and what we need to add to support our arguments with clarity, no? Because again, feeling that we are right or that we are that our values are right doesn't mean that we don't need to explain why, no? So again, like we have clustered these main challenges that we feel that no diminish our impact somehow. So the prioritization and clarity of message, no, things that we should we should think like, what is the one idea people should remember? Are we trying to say too much at once? Are we trying to tackle all the problems of the world in one article? Some content becomes really dense or hard to read many times, no? Second, evidence and credibility, no? We don't usually support our arguments with data or evidence, no? Many times we say, okay, this is like this, and we don't try to explain it, supporting with data, no? Data is very important, or base facts, no? Facts are important. And structural cases causes are sometimes assumed rather than clearly explained, no? If we feel that this is a colonial legacy, dedicate 3 words to explain why, no? We need to prioritize facts and reduce adjectives. Sometimes we say, okay, this is a sustainable, transformative, decolonial, community-led, anti-imperialist future. Wow, that is a lot, you know? So adding adjectives in a row doesn't mean that it's better like, okay, let's try to trickle down on what we want to say. Voices and perspective. Voices from community are not always visible when we speak about them. No, we say we are community-led, that these are voices, people's voices. Let's try to extract some voices, no? And we tend to write from an internal perspective, which can limit broader connection with others, no? It's not that everything needs to be understood by my mother, because that's not the need. But we need to also like try to connect with others that is not our inner circle, no? And then from critique to proposal, we often focus more on critique and reactive analysis than on concrete proposals, or at least paths forward or a call to action. Sometimes we don't know the solution, but at least, engaging, motivating some action. So this is the diagnosis, that we have detected. And we've been talking a lot about this, and we have, go through a lot of clustering and trying to identify. And now I would like to invite you to, if you want to read this again and to tell us, what are the main challenges you recognize from your own work when you have to write an article, to write a statement, and share it with us. Maybe it can be because of the process, because of the work with members, whatever the challenge you detect. So we also can start like adding that to our diagnosis and work together with you. So the floor is open. Thank you.
We have heard, for example, for some of you that sometimes is, yeah, difficult to understand from the format if we're doing a statement or yeah, or a letter, whatever, like maybe there are differences in prioritizing the message or the call to action. Sometimes we don't know where to put the call to action. So it's like this a matter of also reflecting together of how are we, like organizing the format of our messages. Yeah, Mona,
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me?
a little
Sorry,
bit,
I
yeah.
was unmuted the whole time. Um, Thank you so much. I really appreciate the presentation. I think it's very on point, and a lot of the things that you mentioned are things that I also think about, but I could have not articulated it as well as you have. Maybe like on the last point where you talk about from critique to proposal, I think I find that very challenging for me personally as in the work that I do because and I remember conversations with you, Esther, about this, about how like if we remain kind of hopeless and negative, then what's the next step and how do we advance in our work? So, for example, if I'm coming in to say the multilateral system is destroyed, there is no room whatsoever for change, then okay, let's shut down our work. And it's really hard to because I think that is a key message, right? To share something as bleak as that, it's a key message. But then, um, I totally agree that it has to be followed up by something that is a bit more concrete, like in terms of action. And I think this is where we're missing a little bit from more of a systemic and critical um, call to action, let's say, where we're able to see uh, like we're able to see like these next steps that we want to see come to reality, if you will. um and sometimes it feels like it's idealistic, like like we are going to build a people's movement and we're going to share lessons learned across different regions and bring people together and build power. And it sounds wonderful, but how how realistic is it? And then it brings me back to like obviously it's realistic if you have the funds for it, but but I think also like it's a slow process, and the slow process is inevitable, unfortunately. But are there ways to make it quicker? Are there ways to um, build our voice in a way that already like steps us into the direction that we want? And I think we're trying to do that, but it's not always easy to maintain like that vision.
Mm.
And perhaps if we as a network had like more of a collective strategy towards like a future that we see uh, possible, then we can kind of build the different pieces and actions. Um, and the last thing I would say, like I think as well, I agree that we have to reach the everyday person, if you will, more than we have been in the past. And the reason is because I think we like this has been anyway, like from my perspective, looking at the comic, for example, The Power of the People. I think it has been like entrenched into our messaging somehow, but we have to actually push it to the people to kind of make sure that people know you have a place in activism and in movement building, and we're a network that wants to prioritize that space, how it looks like, whether it looks like an NGO, a small one, a new one, or a grassroots movement of young people or older people who are coming together, grandfathers or grandmothers uniting, don't know. But, like there's actions. Yeah, and that like maybe goes back more to our membership and like the traditional versus the non-traditional, and who we're including and who we're not including. Anyway, it's a super interesting topic. I'm gonna stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mona. Like, so thank you so much for that vision. You just make me think in something that I feel like can help us. And it's also when we said like sometimes the structural causes are assumed, that I feel like in this general realm of assuming the causes, I think that we miss the opportunity to be more clear about the solutions, about the proposals, because this is like a thread that is connected with, okay, it's different to say like everything is because of capitalism, but every topic that we're tackling has like specific causes that are related with capitalism, that if we describe them, then it will be easier to find a way to describe also the solutions for the different like causes. So I feel like that's a message that we can start stranded, like describing solutions, but based in a better context, in a context that can help us to see that the solution is not as general as capitalism, as general of building movements, but as detailed as every cause that we're tackling in each topic that we are talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah, and also it's not maybe a solution, it's a value, no? Like healthcare is a value we want all to
And
have.
al- and also
Maybe
I
Angie?
just
Oh,
like
okay.
a little, but I mean, from communications, I feel like we always assumed that people know everything about capitalism. And from communications, I feel, and from a human rights perspective, I feel like we need to we give that context, that that's a part of how we strengthen our voice in this realm. Like if ESERnet helps people to understand what are the causes of the capitalism now, like that's better. Like that's a field that we can explore also to be more explainers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the next part, we are going to talk about some principles that we have created and to discuss about how we can improve this. And I want to give the floor to Evan.
Yeah, thanks so much, Esther and Angie. No, I think I would agree with a lot of what's put forth here, and like some of the challenges of being such a extensive network that tackles so many different things that are interconnected. And often in the messaging, it's hard to put everything into like one carousel that mentions all the various kind of structural forces that we understand are part of every story that we kind of come across. However small it seems or whatever, once you trace it back upstream, you always kind of find the same forces. But as Angie said, like it's not enough to just name it sometimes. But I know that that's what we're trying to do, and we're also trying to be like regionally balanced and keep in mind kind of various perspectives that are represented in the network, and not let our own beliefs, I guess, as the people writing it up kind of dominate. So we're always trying, I think, check ourselves with trying to integrate as many perspectives of the membership as possible into one kind of thing. So I think the editorial, I think the fear of being too editorializing is a real one. On the SOS perspective, I think that the timelines that we deal with is often like very urgent. very in crisis mode. So it's um, as much as I think is, and I think we can do more to incorporate the community voices in some of these communications, but I think it's powerful. I think we've done that and it's been good. Because at the very least, even if institutionally we don't see as much of a response, it is important, I think, to mobilize networks and their voices in support of one another in their own words. That does take some time and it does take some outreach, and sometimes there's multiple of these things happening at once. And so for me, that's often a challenge of like, how much are we asking of members? If every week there's 2 or 3, kind of urgent situations, but on top of that, there's more long-term advocacy that's also happening. So sometimes I feel like there's a kind of competition. There's like a finite amount of comms resource that can be expended at any given time, and so like how to be strategic with that. But I would agree with those things that folks have shared, and then also in the SOS, like depending on the kind of communication, we do adopt a very different style. Often when it's an institution, we're talking to the government, it's like a very legal kind of oriented language. Whereas when it's a statement or a more public kind of letter, I think we try to incorporate more kind of movement-oriented language, more on justice narratives rather than like according to article, so and so of the so and so being, So we do have to have like multiple personas, I think, depending on who we are approaching. But those would be my kind of 2 cents. I do love the idea of not having to tackle everything in every article. And there also is like competing concepts that we really want to socialize. I think is like corporate capture or PEV. There's like a couple of these that we really want to stick, and therefore we want to bring into each kind of conversation we're having every time we speak. So to speak, like we want to say it, just to make sure that it's still relevant. But that can be tricky sometimes, I think, because then it feels a bit forced. Like, well, okay, instead of taking the time to explain each one in its own thing, rather than, I don't know, every time there's an attack with like corporate capture. I don't know, but I do think that's where I'm at. I don't know how to balance that with the community narratives. So I'll leave it at that because I know there's a bunch of answers.
One thing that we will talk about is about audiences, no? Because it's not the same talking to members that talking to a state. So that's also important, no, when you are approaching. So I think it's Georgiana. Then, yeah.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's really exciting to be having this conversation. Thank you. Okay, have a great day. And yeah, so this has already been raised a bit. And Evan, when you were talking about editorializing, you were really sort of getting to some things that I was thinking about, because one area of complexity, I'll call it, that I think about is, yeah, this idea of our voice, collective voice, but how our model of work and core principles also inform that, right? And so I think that something we're all always challenged by is that we're not just writing about our model of work or core principles, like we are member-led, blah, blah, blah. But I think like we're also trying to embed that in our writing. And how I think that's an area of complexity is that like their members can have like a lot of intentionality about the way certain ideas are being framed, about the language used. And so I think that like there's always a consideration also of not wanting to get ahead of where members are, perhaps like in certain language, just as an example. So perhaps it might be like for other priorities that are super important, like clarity and, to put together a definition that we think would make sense and captures, different perspectives. But I think there can be a tension, like if members haven't gotten there. And yeah, and like you said, Esther, we're talking about audience, but thinking about that members are also an audience and like making sure that they recognize themselves in this voice, right? And so that of course can come through actually using their voices and quotes, but I think it also is more nuanced in the way we're writing that we're doing that. And was there anything else I was going to say there? And just to say, like, I think this does apply to, it's useful to have the list that you put together of the different forms of content. And I think it applies to all of them, and including, like, it's something that I'm always thinking about in writing proposals and reports, right? Because there could be lots of ways to shortcut and like package things really neatly, really succinctly, but I don't want to do that, right? And it's not that the two have to be mutually exclusive, but just to state explicitly, like even in that type of writing, I'm always trying to use the ideas, the ways of saying them, the words that have really formed as a product of our model of work and core principles.
Thank you for including that. Yeah, we forgot just to put the annual report and all the grant making, but of course that's part of our writing. Yeah, so we will include it. Thank you. Felipe.
Yes, thank you, Angie. First of all, I appreciate a lot these 4 points. I think that they structure very well, like the problems that not just ESCRnet, but in general human rights organizations face in the midst of this context. And also, I appreciate that we can build an independent voice that is not just the sum of the voices of different. We are not trying just to condense the different voice because that's impossible. But I think that we can position a particular and identifiable voice, and that's very interesting. I was wondering if I was going to say this comment or not, because it comes from, I mean, a place of like it's like a very personal struggle as well. It's not, but I will share it with you to see if this makes sense to anyone. And understanding that I come from a country where we are like one of the most psychoanalyzed countries. So we have so maybe this is not going to be very like clarify a lot, but I was thinking in general terms and in the middle of this context where we are always receiving information about products and like everyone is needing to sell something, and that is part of a very concrete metric, no, like the capitalist metric. So and also the use of artificial intelligence. So I was thinking, to what extent are we like surrendering, to the way that in general terms, like massive communication and AI is structuring the way of thinking. So if there's a way to resist also with the language and with our frames some of these trends, because I think that AI in general and also the way that comms usually happen assume that conflicts are not evolving, that conflicts are something that are closed and that can be solved, that conflicts can be solved. So I will bring you a solution. So conflicts need to be solved, because can be solved and need to be solved. And I can come to you with a concrete proposal on how to solve that problem. And I think that sometimes it's good not to have proposals, just to highlight the critical point and not assume that we are either selling something or either candidates of like a political we don't need necessarily to say, okay, you need to solve, because I think that some things can't be, and we don't need them to be solved necessarily, because they express contradictions that are part of this structure. So, I mean, and we know that they can't be solved so easily. So sometimes it may reduce our horizon if we try to summarize our view in concrete proposals. I understand that that's effective and necessary in terms of how we frame our comms. And I appreciate that. It's not that I'm saying let's not think in those terms, but maybe we can also try to experiment with other framings that are not necessarily always telling the rest what to do or how to act or a call to action or what to think regarding. I mean, we're always trying to condition the way of thinking because that's why we communicate. But this idea of the like the importance of the because like, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I think that in general terms, like the capitalism understands that problems can be solved, and there are some problems that don't need or can be solved in these conditions, or we don't need them to be. I mean, like, for example, law is not meant to solve problems. It's meant to redefine problems or conflicts. So there are some starting points that we all agree, I think, that limit our view in terms of proposing concrete call to actions. But in some other cases, and I think this is interesting because we should be thinking in these terms. But just that.
Thank you, Felipe. Another point to think about. But if I agree, but then we have to explain why we feel that we are not proposing a call to action. Just explain it. No, we can experiment, but we need to be clear about no. So everything needs to be clear.
And also, I mean, I think that we're framing here as a proposal, but also it can be also a way of like explaining why and how we are resisting, like how our resistance to that issues are,
Exactly.
like why we are working on that, like because we're working on something because we want them to. We're not gonna solve it, but because we are the resistant from that issue, or yeah. So I think that proposal part, we're coming from a point that activists were in a couple of years ago, just like giving critique, and how we can be, or either giving proposal solutions or like making more a point of how we are collectively resisting to that, and yeah, that proposal can join all those things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Links.
Yeah, thank you so much, Esther and Angie, for putting this workshop together. And I really appreciate the reflections from my colleagues. I wanted to say something little about evidence and credibility. I think that's a very fundamental point because often I ask myself which evidence is deemed as credible, whether it's this evidence from members. We read a lot of articles from members often, and then we do a lot of shared analysis on our own as a network with the members. So when we are working around interventions, perhaps you want to develop a statement, an article, or whatever it is. The question of, what is deemed as credible comes very important. So, and working in a capitalist system, I've been made to understand that, very many of the evidence that is produced by these international NGOs, the UN, IMF, for example, operates in some way within a capitalist system. And all of us are very critical of the capitalist system on one end. And on the other end, while, for example, the institution like the IMF is highly criticized, you also realize that it is one of the most significant institution when it comes to information on economic matters globally in different countries. So the question of which evidence should we, highlight in our articles as well as our work becomes very important. I mean, how do we balance between what we know is actually, is the information we have within our own analysis credible, or should we go for this other information that we know these institutions are producing as the one that is credible, but still at the same time figure out how, it is influenced by the system of capitalism. My point number 2 is on the diverse positionalities around certain interventions, especially among members and movements. And a good example is, there are certain movements within the network who have a totally different position, for example, when it comes to the IMF as an institution. One of the positions is that this is, for them, they feel that this institution should be scrapped off totally, and we have an alternative system and institution that can actually deal with the global economic and financial matters. That is one positionality. The other one is from a different faction of different movements within the network still, that says, hey, we still have faith. We are very hopeful that and very optimistic that reforms are possible, and we can have a transformation of these institutions, and put together. So when you're putting together a statement, you have these two positionalities: one movement in support of the IMF and reforms within the IMF. One movement is like, no, this is totally unacceptable. For us, we do not believe in that kind of position. So it becomes a bit difficult for one who is putting up that statement, working with both ends and trying to put together something that would actually reflect, the two positionalities. And then my last comment is on the voices, and you mentioned internal perspectives, which often, happens because speaking as a coordinator, for example, trying to put together a statement, the first thing that I'll do is to go back to the shared analysis and the political positions that we have developed with members. So as I think about what should I write, that is my guide. I'm writing internally, but mostly focusing on what have members said on these issues. And that's why more often it would come out as a perspective that is very internal rather than that is outside facing. And then lastly, perhaps the issue of us. I understand we do a lot of work, as I think, as Felipe said initially, as Mona said as well. And often we've tried to find ways to connect the very many pieces of work that we do, including writing statements, for example, or articles that could actually reflect on a number of issues, whether it's on environment and debt and corporate capture, into one. And the big question is whether that then complicates the whole idea that you want, the whole thing that you wanted to communicate, or it makes it easy for people to then connect the many issues that you are trying to communicate. So it's a very complex balance, but I don't know which one is the best, whether we should focus on perhaps addressing one issue at a time and then having a strategy where we are very consistent in our communication. Perhaps develop a system where we are consistently communicating on different topics that are broken down, so that we are not putting so many things into one, complicating it. Yeah, those are just my few observations. Thank you.
No, this is
Thank
a
you,
great
Colin.
conversation. Thank
Very
you.
valid points and tensions for sure.
Yeah, I just want
I
to say
think
that you mentioned many points. I will say, like, with this, like, data that is available, we all know that also from social movements are like a big wave of organizations that are producing data from the communities. Like, some of them are our members. So how can we also start connecting with those, like, narratives that are, like, being documented, like presenting figures also of what's happening in all the topics that we work. Many organizations working on, like, developing data from communities, it's like even us, and also how to use the official data to critique them, like make it part of that context and make it as a starting point also to create an argument against that, but not to just leave it out. If you're not, like, we don't believe that the data is, like, I don't know, the banks, like, figures are correct, like, how can we use them to say, like, they're saying that, but what is our response, but not to give it that, not to make it just everything general. Yep. And yep, over step.
Yeah, we have Pat and Anne, and I think that we still have time. We want to go over an exercise later, and to go to these proposals but I think we have time, and this discussion is super interesting. So let's continue with the discussion, and we will adjust the agenda. So Pat, and I think it's Pat and Anne, right? And Isara, yeah.
Anne, yeah.
And Isara, I
Yeah.
don't, yeah.
I
And
will
is it-
take the floor. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Welcome this topic. And I apologize, I'm going to be very blunt. I'm going to be very general, but I thought that this workshop is for general and not going to very specific. For me, the challenge is now we are talking about the network. The network means our members and our secretariat. So what is produced by the communication team, in my simple mind, it means that would be used by both the secretariat, what we as coordinators produce, and what members are producing themselves. Our kind of templates are shared with members. Are they embracing this organization of information? If yes, is it used consistent? Because this template went through a process of thinking based on what the reactions of what we are doing. So has a lot of value. And if everybody is agreeing with that skeleton that can be shifted a little bit, and if it's not used consistent, how we reinforce it without seeing that we know best, we patronize or whatever. Even listening to my colleagues today, I couldn't pick up one idea that they want to share. I'm sorry. It's me. It's just me. When you are talking, I always try to detach. Am I the only one that cannot cope with you? Or there are many others, but then the audience is coming. Do we have to every time to adjust to the audience, or can we somehow have a way of speaking that from the beginning we centralized and give a main idea, and then that can be developed based on the audience? That's what was crossing my mind, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Anne. We are trying. It's hard to with members, but what we are trying is that all that shared analysis that is coming from members, that we try to put it in a clear and inclusive way. So this is part of the process, and it's really hard to work in different topics and with the amount of information that we have, respecting their voices, respecting inclusivity. But I feel that this is part of the process, and every different statement, every different material is different, and it's really hard. Really, it's really hard. But I think that we are on a good track, and that's why we are doing this. And the first moment is us, and then we will figure out how we facilitate the work within the working groups that they are the ones who are giving us the substance. Without what is going on there, we cannot write anything. And coordinators are the ones who are facilitating that information to the communications team so we can build a clear messaging together. So it's a chain, and we all have to be on track. And I feel that Secretariat, the conversation starts here in this group, and then we will keep working. So, Pat, I think it's your turn.
Thanks so much. And yeah. So a couple of points. I think, first of all, appreciating this. It's not going to be very simple conversation, I believe, because I think for acknowledging, first of all, we are touching upon a very broad, comms work of the network. A couple of points also that have been put was also, having a lot of tensions in itself. I personally agree with the in principles with the four elements that we have put. But yeah, I also have some thoughts. It has been said that I think beyond audience, okay, we're talking to members, but if I want to respond to the main challenge I recognize from my work is more on the political situation that we're sitting. For example, again, differences between members, and it was also touched upon by Collins. Now it's about for example, Santa Marta Conference or the carbon credit or carbon market, and then or just transition, for example, and how to approach this, and then that comes down then to the very challenge of like proposing a solution, right? So that's also like wanting to also just share that. Now for me, the question is more on like, in that kind of situation, then how do we shape our message so that we don't necessarily propose solutions? Because I find it very challenging, no, if we have to propose solutions, let's say, but then how do we then frame our message? And then also for me, another thing is like solutions. What would that mean? It's a long track of political understanding that we have also different members even within the secretariat. I can say that we would say the same word with different meanings also, perhaps from our backgrounds, from our so that's that. I want to put it in place first, and then I think about the data, no, I do agree that the quantitative data is super important, but again, we are in this war on narratives, and we know that, and what's credible by whom, what does it mean, for example, would also be very important. What do we want to do as a network, for example, what kind of data that we need to put out there for our credibility? For me, of course, it comes from our members, from for example, our CLR or our research. But then we are again being faced with the question of credibility of those data, in the more mainstream world. So a lot of the things also coming in. Are we using I don't know, are we using, for example, some standard of official institution on poverty for us to support our narrative? Or are we using the fact, or like the stories from our communities? It's all challenges that I'm putting here, like, oh my God, this is, there's so much headache. And then I also feel that while we want to have like some credibility with the quantitative data, the balance also there is super important, because I'm wondering whether we're going to be working on something that is, we are trapped in quantitative data of calculation. And then, for example, in the climate crisis context, non-economic loss and damage, which is non-quantitative at all, is something that we are really fighting for, right? So what does that mean then for us? Again, no question, no answer to all of this, but just really putting forward a couple of challenges. And then lastly, I want to say that like, I think we all work together, programs and comms, like trying to be in navigating the diversity of our membership. And I also hope that like it wouldn't be like something that like one size fits all. And I can say this for example, from the template last time that Angie was saying, hey, this is a template for submission to the UN. It doesn't work at all for the submission that I wanted to work on. It was something completely different. I put it also out there because I think our nature is also super diverse. So I'm going to stop here, and I think I look forward to more sharing later.
Thank you, Pat. No, I mean, I'm loving this conversation, honestly. It's like, sparking a lot of ideas in my brain and a lot of... So regarding the solutions, when we say solutions, we also say call to action or paths forward. And again, it's also, we can say values. There are things that why we are not talking even about a specific solution, but maybe we really need to explain what is our value around when we are saying that we have to fight for the right to health, or the right to that is the thing that we are saying, no? That not like saying, okay, we want this and not explaining why, no? So it's not only a solution, it's the value, a vision for change. It can be a vision, no? So that's one point. Around credibility, of course, but when we say facts, for instance, if we are saying fossil fuels are shaping the agenda, so we can use the information that our allies at COP are putting together every year about how many fossil fuel lobbyists are at COP. So that type of information is something that we can include, no? And that is going to give us a perspective, no? So we can tweak this and building. And I feel, for instance, it's super interesting the thing that we are talking about solutions, no? How we can tweak that to understand that not always we need to say from A we get to B, no? So that is also, and yeah, and regarding the template, that template was created for articles, and I totally understand that it's not, you cannot use it for everything. If you are working on an op-ed, maybe you need something else, no? But there are certain things that we can use, no, about how we position ourselves before writing. What questions we have to keep in mind. For instance, Anisoara, you are very you are very spot on saying main message, what we are trying to say, no? So that type of things. Vanessa.
No,
And I feel,
I also
oh,
think that when Pat mentioned the submission, it wasn't the same template as the news. It was when I shared something that Felipe, like the last submission that Felipe just like make with like another
an
member.
amicus.
So, and it was, yeah, it's about like the format and the way of putting the logos, like more on the format of the layout that
The
the
display.
substance, yeah. So maybe we can just like have a conversation about how to clarify and how to create a space where our submissions like have some layout that is like consistent, that it wasn't like we need to do a submission like this. Yeah. Vanessa.
Thank you. This is super interesting, and yeah, there are a lot of things that we can continue discussing and yeah, go even more deeply into. But what I wanted to share, that I feel like I share most of the comments from my colleagues, yeah, especially in terms of how to deal with the voices of different perspectives. I have this phrase in my mind that we don't want to build one single story, no? I think in terms of communication, we want to reflect the plurality of our members, and we are always yeah, we are contesting different perspectives, different voices, but of different worldviews, and it's really a challenge to try to pack everything into one format with a number of characters, like limit number of characters when we are trying to put all the descriptions, and sometimes reality is much, much complex than what we can say in one paragraph, no? So it's really tricky to try to do it that way, but I feel like there are some tools that we can use and that you are developing, and that's super helpful. But when I was thinking about the question and listening to everyone, I was struggling with the impact question. What is our impact? How are we measuring our impact? And I think it's related also with what Felipe was saying about the system that we are working with, no? And it's either patriarchal systems of communicating and capitalist system of communicating, and I think that the type of we need to agree on the type of communications that we wanted to embrace, because communication as litigation or advocacy are not neutral, no? We are coming from a political position. So sometimes I feel like, yeah, using the channels on social media and trying to get more followers, no, or more likes or more impressions, or I don't know, like that could be one way of measuring. Another could be, by drafting one single piece, people in your community or your working group or they will feel like, okay, we are doing this together. So a sense of community, no, or a sense of having a path forward together, collective mindset, or we are using communications to actually build more movements, no, by little, because it's not of a statement that we build movements. It's the process of creating statement or the process of creating the data, no, for putting there out there. So how do we use comms as the strategy that it's aligned with the impact that we wanted to see in all the types of different works that we are doing? Because we, as Evan was saying, we have different objectives for each space and for each work. Sometimes it's very internal. Sometimes it's to get media to pick up our language, no, or really change the narrative in mainstream. But sometimes it's not even, we are not even looking at mainstream media. We wanted to reach out those communities far away, no? So the strategies are different and the challenges too. Maybe it's a way of like these examples or these diagnoses are based on something that we wanted to achieve. But I'm guessing, how are we all understanding the impact, no, or what we are trying to achieve?
Yeah, that depends on it's more the change that we want to achieve. And that depends a lot of, as Mona was saying, about the strategy, for instance, what is the change that you want to achieve in the community-led research or the FPAR on care? What is the change that you want to achieve and the treaty? What is the change you want to achieve when you are pursuing active thought? And communications, it's accompanying you during the and regarding social media, we are grappling also with social media. I'm the first one that I think that likes what does a like mean, what is that, what mobilize, and that's why we spend so many hours that you cannot even imagine trying to explain everything. I mean, we see a complicated amicus and we try to explain it and explain it and explain it, no? Because it's not, and because our narrative is there, our explanation is there. Maybe we get 5 likes, but at least, no, we are there. No, we said something about that. Yeah, we explain it, no? So that's that we are always grappling with how we explain it, how we communicate, no? Because social, but we cannot not be, I mean, we can say no social media. I don't know if that's smart, I don't know. Yeah.
No, you can be sure that our focus as communicators is not the capitalism way of working.
Yeah, but it's hard. But otherwise you say, okay, let's not. But yeah, so especially being international, no, that we are not inserted in one community. We are in so many places at the same time, no. So it's really hard. So we have 5 minutes left and we didn't go. So can we use 10 minutes, please? Or do we have any updates to share? Like someone has any update and we can consume maybe 10 more minutes?
So we're wrapping up. So are we asking to stay 10 minutes more?
Yeah, I think so, right? It's okay? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay,
Yeah,
Angie.
10 minutes past 10:30? Sorry.
Past 10:30.
No, before 10:30. It could be 10:20.
No, I mean for us, for our workshop, and then it will be.
Okay,
So
sorry.
let's see, maybe until 10:30 we're gonna be ready with all that we need to.
It's in case someone has an update.
Yeah. No, we were just thinking, and I feel like this conversation was incredibly connected with the things that we are also proposing and in this refining our approach. I feel like all this conversation is just like putting more inputs to this that we call like some principles that we can yeah, have in our every time that we think in our way of communicating together. So I think that this is just like a summary of what we just like of the conversation that we have. So what are we looking for to have in our voice is like that we can make a clear message that can explains and not does not assume that is like of course like as political as ESCRnet does like yeah pursue its voice names structures and actors, which it has some rigorosity grounded in evidence, and that evidence, we know that there are many ways of like putting that evidence in our materials, evidence from communities, evidence from our partners, from our members, and from journalism. A voice that is collective, that integrates real voices, and it's propositive, shows a path forward. And yeah, so we have all this conversation about what that means. So it's just like we just put this sum up of elements, context, but plus actors, plus voices, plus evidence, plus a proposal of this path forward as a way of maybe trying to work together with our messages. But I think that we already have this conversation. I think that, I don't know, this question about if you have another principle or reflection, I feel like we already have all these reflections that we just had in the previous section. So I feel like we can move forward. But if we have some comments about, yeah, a comment about what we are at this point, like of course the floor is open. Evan.
I just want to add one quick thing before we move on. On this, I think of principles. I don't know if it's a principle, but it's something I've been thinking about, which is the idea of like that our communications are building our confidence, our collective confidence around the changes that we are bringing forth into the world. I feel like sometimes with the SOS, our comms can be a bit demoralizing because often, at least for me, members come to me when they're in a crisis or they're like in the worst moments. And so we often don't have so much time to build the confidence and to showcase the victories and the power that the network actually represents, and by extension kind of demoralizing the opposition or demoralizing those who are preventing change, and showing them not just on the wrong side of history, but on the losing side of history, that the ground is shifting and that they're losing, and that we have the momentum, that the world that we are seeking to build is actually closer than it seems. Because I think the capitalist, colonial media apparatus is trying to do that constantly, is to demoralize us and to engage in that kind of psychological war. And I think we should keep that in mind also in our own communications, that is part of the battle, and how we present ourselves as strong, united, and winning is important.
I 100% agree with that. Thank you. Yeah, having hope. So we're moving to, I know. Okay. So this, Esther.
Oh, well, this is a short snapshot of things that before writing, no?
Sorry.
Yeah. So things that we could, because that's something that I you can have internalized if you do this like every day, but maybe step back and say, okay, before writing, this is a very an exercise that a journalist, we do every time. That is, what is happening? Why does it matter now? Who is involved? And what do we propose? No, it's like and very important, the audience, no? Who are we speaking to? Because it's not the same speaking to members and speaking to a state and speaking to a journalist. It's completely different. But it's still, they need to have the information above, no? The above information. Then, what do we want them to understand? What that person, what that group of people need to understand about the problem that we are presenting, and what do we want them to do? If I'm talking to someone, I want them to understand something in order to do something, even if the to do something is to reflect on the question. Even to feel an urgency. No, it's the combination of action and feeling. It's really important. No, so I know that it's weird, but try to play around with these, no, with these ideas of, okay, I want to this state to change its mind. What information I need to say to give it, blah blah blah, and simple structure. So what is happening, why it matters, add some evidence, add voices, member quotes, testimonials, stories, and what we propose that it's demands. Sometimes we have a lot of demands. I know that it's weird because we have a lot of members and don't know. So, but at least start with a clear message, no, a clear overarching demand that is clear to understand. No, so because clarity is also political, this it's a beautiful sentence. So let's try to make everybody to understand, engage, and act, including members. No, members. I feel that they are a strategic audience of us. Sorry for using audience, but it's easier for me to use that concept. Without further ado, Angelica, you want to present quickly with the
Yeah,
exercise?
just we share with you in these groups that we just like explain in here like different statements and ask you if you just have like a couple of minutes to read them. And we want just to have like a short discussion, maybe 5 minutes, that we can go into breakup groups and having this like conversation about like share your like with all this conversation that we just have in mind, share impressions about what about the statement that we have 2 days in advance, and just like having a general conversation of maybe what is missing, actors, evidence, clarity, action, and how you will improve it. So if we can have that in mind, maybe take a picture or a screenshot, or because I don't know how to share that while you are in the breakup groups.
Yeah, they have access to the chat. I can put everything.
Yeah. So let me. So I don't know if you have any questions, but let me just stop sharing. Breakup, but I don't know who's in the breakup. I don't know. Assign. First, but Georgia, Sally, Evan. But Georgia, Sally is not here. Evan. Okay. Second, Mona, assign. Mona, Greta, Vanessa. Perfect. Third sign. Felipe, Collins, Anne. Okay. Open. If I open them, yeah. Can you go now to the, yeah. So, Greta, are you, yeah, perfect. Me encanta nuestro workshop, es fascinante.
Es muy divertido. Imagínate cuando discutemos como tipo, yo digo, tácticas, ¿no? Porque se está mezclando un poco de, ok, si quieres. No, ya, es muy divertido. Es muy divertido.
El recording, pero estamos recording nosotros en este momento, sí.
Sí,
supongo, como el main. Listo, listo. Entonces, bueno, entonces que les damos 5 minutos nada más porque ya se acabó el tiempo, entonces a las 20:25, ¿no? Seis
sí. Y
minutos.
luego hacemos un wrap up y decimos muchas gracias. Y esto es el comienzo de otra serie, porque yo creo que ahora estaría bien también hablar de estrategias, ¿no? Un poco para que vean toda las lo difícil que es nuestro trabajo.
Comunicaciones. El
Lo
capitán.
difícil que es nuestro trabajo. Ay, bueno, no, pero ha estado muy bien, y me ha dado que pensar también, ¿no? Lo que decían, de una forma muy compleja, ¿no? Pero el tema de que no siempre hay una solución. Dices, bueno, pero hay un valor, hay una visión, ¿no? Por
Hay
lo
una
menos
parte positiva, hay una parte
hay
positiva
una
de
visión de decir, no
por qué
quiero que
estamos
el
trabajando acá.
capitalismo sea el sistema dominante, porque hay otro, ¿no? Hay una visión, ¿no? Siempre hay un nexo que tenemos que explicar bien, porque si no dejas,
Un propósito,
exacto,
porque pues para
exacto, un
eso. Entonces es
valor.
como reframing that in
Mm,
solutions y en like
mm,
sí, como una visión, un propósito, una intención, pues una razón por la que estamos trabajando en esto, ¿no?
exacto,
The
¿no?
reason
Y
why, like the change
claro,
that we wanna, yeah,
sí,
sí, sí,
bueno,
sí. No, muy
ha
chévere.
estado muy bien, me lo estoy pasando
Y
muy bien.
además todo el mundo súper propositivo y como
Engaged. Ujú.
engaged. Sí, es lo importante de tener una buena presentación. ¿Sabes
Total.
eso?
Y a
Como,
nosotras nos ayuda un montón porque no te pierdes en ningún momento, ¿verdad? Vas ahí como tienes
mm,
tu esta.
muy chévere.
No, y al final está bien hacer esto también, el breakout, pero al final la conversación ha sido la que hemos tenido. O sea, quiero
Mm.
decir,
No, pero es chévere también tener casos específicos, ¿no? Como, bueno, ahora miremonos.
y aparte son casos específicos, si quieres ahora cuando vuelvan, como si quieres explica o explica un poco que son, o sea, que son casos, o sea, que no son casos ni que están escritos mal ni que estén escritos bien, en los que hemos participado también
Ah, sí,
nosotras,
sí,
¿no? O
después.
sea, no pasa nada, no hace falta. Que
Ujú.
es, bueno, no sé.
Sí, son buenas notas, sí, como que como podríamos luego de pronto hacer un resumencito de esta conversación, ¿cierto?
Sí. Hacemos un resumen y ponemos así cosas como, igual pueden ser pendientes, tipo tema de soluciones, o sea, como ciertas cosas que han detectado también, que para seguir pensando en ello, ¿no? Como en la cajita,
Ujú,
¿no?
ujú, ujú,
Nuestro
ujú.
baúl, ¿no? De comunicaciones sigue ahí un poco cosas que tenemos que solucionar conjuntamente.
Total, total, total.
Pero bien, yo creo que todo el mundo se plantea muchas preguntas, ¿no?
Y que no tenemos tampoco tantos espacios como de reflexionar
Exacto.
sobre esto, o sea, pareciera que esto es como una cosa asumida y para nada,
Mm.
que siempre reflexionar sobre cómo lo hacemos, por qué lo hacemos así,
Es que no
es
tenemos mucho
importante.
espacio como equipo
De retroalimentación
de
y de revisión
retroalimentación.
y de revisión de nuestras prácticas. Sí.
Y eso,
Eso además construye colegaje,
total,
sí,
lo
nos hace más
une.
cercanos, sí.
Mm.
Me encanta nuestro workshop. Bueno, y ayer estuvo entonces, estuviste con APWLD.
Ah, sí, bueno.
¿Quiénes vinieron?
Era de IPWLD con Mina Fem y Arrow. Y entonces luego eran dos partes, una de organizaciones, Afrodat también, y luego estaban Naciones Unidas, una de mujeres, un TAD y uno de Australia, de representante australiano. ¿Era? Mira, yo decía, me tendría que haber ido a la de los tribunales. Lo juro, era, pero quiero estar aquí. Pero bueno, pero bien, bien ver a April, que siempre, nada, estuvo bien. Vino Besma también.
Chévere.
Pero bueno, bien, bien un poco también para... hay que
Conectar con los
también estar
miembros.
ahí para conectar y para entender. Yo creo que ya les vamos a traer para acá, ¿no?
Bueno, ¿qué pongo ahí? Close all rooms y ellos vienen.
Creo, si lo empiezas a cerrar,
Close all
te viene,
rooms.
sí, te viene,
Listo,
te deja como un minuto, ¿no?
listo.
¿Tienes una cuenta atrás?
Close all rooms.
We
Chao.
are closing the rooms.
Ah, ya, listo. En un minuto. Perfecto.
Bueno, ahora si quieres, pide si quieres tú, a ver, ¿qué tal?
We're
No, pero
closing the rooms and
es
closing the
fascinante
workshop.
el tema de la voz, de cómo contar, ¿no?
Claro,
Y
porque
luego es
todos estamos
eso, y luego a veces
involucrados.
hablamos de media, capitalismo. Nosotras somos periodistas, conocemos a tantos amigos periodistas que hacen un trabajo interesante, ¿no? Como también empaquetamos a gente y decimos, hay gente increíble contando historias, la importancia de saber contar una historia, de contarla bien, ¿no? Es fundamental, es importante para la democracia y no puede ser que lo primero que ha hecho Trump, ¿qué ha sido? O lo primero que hace un gobierno autoritario, perseguir a los periodistas.
Mm, mm.
That was short.
Hello. That was short, I
Hello.
know. It's always the same. It's impossible, you know. You have your plan, but it was good.
So yeah, we're closing the rooms and closing the workshop. So like it's time to have some general reflections. If some of you wants to just like share a little bit of your thoughts and your discussions, and we can just start wrapping up.
Group one. No, it's an informal discussion, no? To see
Yeah.
what did you see on the statement of the corporate accountability? How did it work?
Is it ours, right? That's
Yeah,
ours, no?
Pat, it's you.
Yes. So I agree with all the points that were shared in the last like 50 seconds of our conversation. One was I think Evan was sharing about like perhaps some community voices. This is something that can be added there, and also Georgia was mentioning about like maybe a little bit also on the process how members are coming together for the collective demands, and I agree with all of those. Yes, that's from our group.
Okay.
Thank you. Second group, Mona, Greta, and Vanessa.
It was an environment, no? The reaction state.
I think, oh gosh, I'll try to summarize. It's really tough. But I think, and sorry, Greta, we didn't even get to hear from you. But yeah, just to say, I think similarly, I think we talk about like community-led research. Vane, please come on in here if I'm missing the point, but you said it very eloquently. But we don't really highlight the community-led research itself in there. We just mention it, and because one member was in that space, for example, but it's not necessarily tied to the community-led research that is being done. And then that there's also like a lot of themes that we're trying to cover, and obviously that's part of the conversation that we've had before, that we try to like tick all the boxes of everything that we're working on as a collective, and then the message is diluted and we're not sure who we're talking to and what we are trying to achieve. And then also like I think from the perspective of like someone who is interested, for example, in who are the corporations that are the antagonizers, that are most antagonizing in that space, to better understand like how the architecture of corporate capture across all of our work, like kind of trying to name maybe some of the major corporate actors that have been the most antagonizing. I think that's easier in the treaty process because there are only three representatives, two sometimes, but obviously like they're representing a lot of evil companies that are then all present in the COP and are kind of, for example, I'm not sure like who is the main antagonizer, and I know they're all evil, but like trying to better understand, yani, when we say that the agenda of fossil fuel was, like total failure, that it wasn't like even mentioned to try and phase it out, like who, for example, why, and obviously it's a complicated issue and it cannot probably be mentioned in one article, but maybe to try and better identify some of the actors to begin with. Anyway, sorry, did I miss something, Vane, Greta?
Thank you so much. And finally, Felipe Collins and Isora, and that they review one of them. Yeah,
So,
SOS actions.
yeah, it's a letter to members that was.
I can go. So we thought that it could have been interesting to collect the voice of some of the involved or the victims of the situation. Then it could have started with the context and the facts instead of with like reminding the values and that connect us. And also we've discussed that a little bit more of the maybe the political background and what have we done regarding that particular conflict could have been good. And I don't know if I'm missing something, Collins and
I think you captured everything. I think we just talked about the flaw and then the missing voices, but also who is the perpetrator, like who was behind all of this assault and all of these violations. It is not very clear in the statement, yeah.
Hey, no, this has been for us extremely helpful. Like we were thinking of how to, like take all your like a summary of this discussion because we think that is really important for us to keep building on how can we strengthen our voice. And of course, this one was a workshop not to express like the way of doing it, but to build it together too. So we're gonna add to all these principles and to these questions like all your input. So thank you so much for
Yeah.
your for being so proactive and so generous with your thoughts. So
Hmm.
we want to open to maybe the 8 minutes that we have. If we have some updates from the secretariat, some things that are urgent for us to know, let us raise your
I
hand if you
think
have.
we are 2 minutes over time, so I feel that, yeah. Yeah,
But
we are going to share notes, the reflections, because this presentation has principles that, of course, are not definite, and the conversation is also informing what we are building together. So we will share the presentation alongside some reflections. And this is the first of a couple of more strategic communications workshops around different things that we have planned for this year with you all. So I feel that we don't have more time. We are past over time. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I feel we can wrap up the call, no? At least. Okay, we will keep creating moments like this. I feel it's super important also as a team, no? To have this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
See
Esther,
you.
Angie. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you. It was
Bye-bye.
great.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.